On this episode of Lapeef, Let's Talk, set of the graduating population from that university. You see what I'm saying? Whereas we already know for a fact that people that have
doctors,
right, and we already know that the overwhelming majority of people that graduate with a college degree is going to make more than $1 million on average than a person that just has a high school education. So that's across the board, regardless of whether you went to a HBCU or you went to a regular university. So how much do we factor into an HBCU playing a role in the success of people in general? Is it just based off of, similar to how we have conversations about proximity and crime and all that other type of stuff? The overwhelming majority of the population of people that go to HBCUs are, I'm assuming, Black. So naturally, they're going to produce more of these types of people. And how much did that factor into the statistics? And how do we break that down to be able to have a real conversation on their success and helping or hindering people transition into the real world?
Ashley, I think I read something about how most, don't quote me, but I think most Black doctors and like dentists and
are from
HBCU.
They are.
Like, I have heard that. I have heard that before. I have heard a lot of that before.
They do better financially. This particular study says that they have a better sense of purpose and social well-being. Now that's self-reported data, right? But the financial part speaks,
objectively. Yeah.
And they tend to represent most of our professional degrees. I think, what is it? Like 40% of African Americans in the U.S. Congress, came from HBCUs. They came from HBCUs. So, I mean, if you're asking about reality, I think they must be doing something right. Now, I don't think endowments.
What about the other question of being able to compete for the best students worldwide? Because correct me if I'm wrong, HBCUs are not supposed to be limited just to Black people, correct?
No, they're not. But
so are they competing for the best students worldwide?
So are HBCUs competing for the best students? Well, they've started to, but that's not the same question that JR has. It's very different.
Well, I asked a couple of different questions to be able to support the conversation that we were having as far as competition, as a whole.
But I don't think that was the purpose of HBCUs wouldn't lend to them competing for the best talent globally, to be honest. And really what we see, I believe, when you mention University of Michigan, Ohio State, I think about UGA, Georgia Tech. Even if I look at University of Illinois, those are all research schools, right? And those are all also they get funding from government. And so there's incentive for them to compete. Whereas HBCUs really kind of hold true to their purpose. And that's why, to Ashley's point, that's why I perked up when you said that people that attend HBCUs, and we do see this by and large, do have a greater sense of purpose and a greater sense of what they need to give back to society and contribute to society than people who attend other institutions.
Okay. Are HBCUs helping or hindering the transition to reality compared to PWIs?
Transition to reality. The thing is that reality is that we live in a very Eurocentric situation. So you're not escaping that. Whether you go to a HBCU or PWI, you're not escaping the workforce. You're not escaping all of these things that are just part of the fabric of American society, right? And I know Anton spoke about globally, which I get what he was saying in terms of that. But if we're talking about, here in this country, I don't think that I don't think HBCUs hinder. I think they help because they give a space where you can, receive the support and the education and everything else, and then go out into the world with those connections, like Chicago, I think, was talking about earlier in terms of Kamala. I think he was like pointing to that, like, look, she came from a HBCU, and I'm not a, whatever about Kamala, but just building up these networks where you do have this support. This is something that's it's like a marathon, it's not a sprint. And that's why I brought up earlier the fact that HBCUs are not as old as the Harvards and Yales of the world. So as time goes on, hopefully these institutions, the HBCUs, can build build more and more, I guess, as time goes on, to better equip people for, whatever's going on in the world. I don't think it's hindering, though. I definitely think that it's helping, because just based on facts, like Ashley said, there are lots of very successful people that come from HBCUs. The majority of Black doctors and dentists and whoever else come from HBCUs. So like, it's going in the right direction. I think we just have to give it more.
I don't know. I mean, it's almost like, because I thought that the majority of Black doctors, for example, or whatever, I thought that they were actually foreign, like they were actually immigrants. But again, I could be wrong. And that's one of the reasons why I don't have an opinion on this either way. I'm just asking the questions because I am curious. And I think that there's certain questions that haven't been answered as far as
maybe
not necessarily from this panel.
Maybe that
it's not a popular topic when it comes to global competition and, tuition from foreign students and all that other type of stuff. I think that that's a conversation that a lot of people don't take into consideration when they have these. But I don't have an opinion either way, because I don't know enough about the culture about HBCUs to be able to even have an opinion. But I am curious about certain questions.
I'm curious too, to look deeper into that, because you bring up an interesting point. I know that a lot of African people, like people that are not American, but are still Black, from the diaspora and all that, end up in certain professional fields and whatnot. So I wonder when that the things that I read as it relates to the majority of Black doctors and whatnot being from HBCUs, I wonder if that took that into account. I'm not sure. I would have to look more.
And then, like, what percentage is that, right? Because let's be realistic. Doctors in general, no matter what school you go to, whether it's an HBCU or you go to a regular, university, that's a small set of the graduating population from that university. You see what I'm saying? Whereas we already know for a fact that people that have
doctors,
right, and we already know that the overwhelming majority of people that graduate with a college degree is going to make more than $1 million on average than a person that just has a high school education. So that's across the board, regardless of whether you went to a HBCU or you went to a regular university. Yeah. So how much do we factor into an HBCU playing a role in the success of people in general? Is it just based off of, similar to how we have conversations about proximity and crime and all that other type of stuff? The overwhelming majority of the population of people that go to HBCUs are, I'm assuming, Black. So naturally, they're going to produce more of these types of people. And how much did that factor into the statistics? And how do we break that down to be able to have a real conversation on their success and helping or hindering people transition into the real world?